Hello, my friends, and welcome to Holden's Top 11. My special guest tonight, comic creator and my pal, Peter Welmerink. Welcome, Peter.
Hey Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How have you been?
Good, good, very good.
Thanks for coming on. We're pretty excited about this. Tonight, we're going to cover our topic, which is Holden's Top 11 Modern Graphic Novels. You know, Peter and I were talking during the break, and compiling any list of the top graphic novels is a daunting task. And one of the reasons why is there's been so many great ones that have come out over the years, right?
Yep, yeah,
And as you and I were saying, we had to make some kind of cutoff. So the rules for this top 11 list will be this only includes graphic novels that have been created since 1986. And our reasoning behind that is that, in my opinion, if you look back throughout the Silver Age, particularly the works of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, many
yep.
of those classic storylines would be considered by
Graphic,
today's, yeah, they'd be
yeah,
graphic novels.
yep.
So we're going to focus on the modern stuff for tonight. I remind you, this list is for exhibition purposes only. I beseech you, no wagering. So let's dive right into it, shall we? Number 11 on the list, Pete,
Yep.
The Sandman by Neil Gaiman.
Yeah,
One of my all-time favorites. I'm a huge Neil Gaiman fan, one of my inspirations.
hmm,
And I should point out, one of the reasons why I got into it so much is the covers of that series were so unique. It
yeah,
was, of course, designed by Dave McKean.
hmm,
Are you familiar with him?
yeah, yeah. I think he took stuff out of his garage and maybe even some dead things and made book covers out of them.
Right, right. He did a lot of that. It's sort of like a multimedia thing. And I,
Hmm.
I read an interview once where he went around and to like thrift shops and taxidermy shops and tried to find these sort of disturbing items that would fit the elements of the
He
story.
won.
And of course, it
Yeah.
matched so greatly with the sort of,
Hmm.
the Gothic horror storylines of
Right.
Neil Gaiman, which were just so well written
Yep.
and existing even today, and
Hmm.
potentially more popular than ever.
Yeah. Especially with the Netflix
Right,
series too.
right, yeah, which is it's been
So
very, very well written.
so after I watched that, I felt like I needed to go and like read some of the books. You know.
Yeah, they're terrific. I'd have to recommend it. Anybody who's watching this video, if you haven't experienced Neil Gaiman's work, I recommend it in the most fervent terms.
Hmm.
While we're on the subject of these kind of British authors, let's launch right into number 10. That's The Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. Are
Yeah.
you an Alan Moore fan, Pete?
I I'm gonna say yes, except I remember reading like the comics, the Swamp Thing comics, Animal Man. I know Animal Man's uh further up the list, but yeah, I yes. So I'm gonna say yes. I was an Alan Moore or am an Alan Moore fan.
Yeah,
So, but I read more of the comic books when they were out
yeah,
way back in the day than
the serial,
yeah, yeah.
the
Yep.
floppies, as we would say.
Yeah.
I read them that way too when they first came out, and of course back then Alan Moore was a new guy
Hmm.
to me, and
Yeah. Yep.
the thing that struck with me, just such a powerful writer. Like, his writing style is not like the other comic and graphic
Hmm.
novel writers. It's very memorable and very distinct. I mean, if you put it into a lineup, I could pick out an Alan Moore script just about every time.
Sure. Yep.
So, and he's going to appear on this list again, so I won't spend too much time talking about the Swamp Thing. But I will say that when I picked up that first issue of his run, and he started his reimagining of who Alec Holland was,
Right.
man, what a memorable and sort of disturbing take
Hmm.
on the what is at its core, it's a body horror
Right.
story.
Yep. Yep.
Let's move right on to number 9, Kingdom Come by Alex Ross and Mark Waid.
Yep. Heck yes.
Um, Very capably written by Mark Waid and a terrific story, but this is a great time to sort of focus on the artwork of Alex Ross,
Oh yeah. Yep.
one of the
He,
titans of the industry.
yep. One of my favorites. So I always like I can't turn down an Alex Ross cover, especially if it's like one of my favorite characters. It's just amazing artwork. And that was a good book too.
Yeah, yeah,
So as far as story and um so yeah, and I think they isn't Gog's still a character in the DC universe?
I think he
So
is.
it wasn't I know it's supposed to be like a uh Elseworlds
Yeah.
type story, but obviously with the multiverse.
Yeah, and boy,
So
I'm so glad that you brought up the Elseworlds storylines. They were some of the best stories.
yeah, yep. Gotham by Gaslight.
You said it faster than I could. Wasn't
Uh-huh.
that that was
That was Mike
yeah,
Mignola.
right.
Yeah,
Boy, his
yep.
take was just terrific, wasn't it?
Yeah, I love that. I still have that book.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Me too. So, without further delay, I'm going to change it up just a little bit, Pete. Are
Mhm.
you a manga fan or manga, as some people say?
Um, yes, but but I don't have like a I know enough about it.
Right.
Okay. So
Sure. And a lot of us Westerners do, but
mhm,
I'll go on record as saying, look, I'm not a fan. There's very few manga that I will sit through,
mhm.
and this is one man's opinion.
Yep.
Your mileage may vary. I don't feel that they're particularly well written or particularly well drawn, but there's glaring exceptions, of course, to that rule. And
Mhm.
one of them is Lone Wolf and Cub by,
Yeah.
I'm going to try and pronounce their names correctly.
Okay.
That's Kazuo, let me try that again, Kazuo Koike
Mhm.
and Gojeki Kojima. I hope I got that correct. And the thing I like the most about that series, it really has the feel almost like a Western, and
Mhm.
there's a
Yes.
lot of wordless panels, which, I'm a
Yep.
big sucker for wordless panels. And
Mhm.
one of the things about the graphic novels is sometimes the less words, the better.
Yep. Yep.
And man, this creative team, they just nailed it on this assignment. I mean, it's powerful material. And if you are not a manga fan and you
Mhm.
want to check out something that's cool, please take this recommendation and check out
Yeah.
Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yep.
I'd say it's one of the best ones. And I would recommend it to anybody who is looking to experience a graphic novel if they're not too sure what they're getting into.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is you don't have to have too much knowledge about it, and it's very easy to follow. And
Well, and it's a classic, really,
right,
when it
right.
comes to yeah.
Well, and
So
went on for just a crazy number of volumes too.
mhm.
I don't remember exactly how many volumes, but I know
Mhm.
it's that series has long legs. Moving on to number 6, I wanna keep the list sort of fresh.
Yep.
Number 6, I've got Road to Perdition by Max Allan Collins and Richard Pierce Rayner. Um,
Got me there. You
yeah,
got me
this
there.
it's a terrific one. It's a little bit more of a sort of a Godfather-esque
Mhm.
gangland story, and it was made into a pretty good movie
Yeah, Tom Hanks.
with Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And I sometimes joke around, man, you're going to get into something good when both of the creators have 3 names, Max Allan Collins and Richard Pierce Rayner. But
There you go.
it's something that, as graphic novels go, it's very different, right? And it's got some religious overtones, or at
Mhm.
least in the ending, if that might push some people away. But if you're
Mhm.
more of a fan of gangster stories than superheroes hitting each other,
Mhm.
then Road to Perdition is probably the one for you.
Oh,
Recommend it in the strongest possible terms.
right. And I believe it takes place in Michigan.
Oh, is that so?
I think so.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I didn't
I'll
realize
have
that.
to I have to look it up, but I think it was supposed to be set in Michigan.
I know
So,
part of it is in Chicago because they go to find Al Capone, and
yep.
he's got a great line about the Chicago cops. There are no police in Chicago, only killers with badges.
Right. And
Yeah.
and I believe what happens, the main character comes up to Michigan to the lakeshore, and I think that's where they're hiding out, maybe,
Oh yeah,
from what I
sure,
remember.
sure.
So anyway,
That's a good one.
yeah.
For number 5, we chose a little bit more of an obscure title. I wouldn't say it's obscure necessarily. This title regularly makes lists for the best graphic novels of all time. Number 5 is Day Tripper. This is
Mm,
by the Brazilian super team of Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba,
mm,
and this is a very deep uh, uh, story, and it's kind of along the lines of what is the meaning of life is the way I would describe it. It's almost hard to really describe what it's about, but it's a 10 issue series that was compiled, and each issue sort of ends with the death of the protagonist as he explores the meaning of existence and this kind of thing.
Wow.
It's a mind bender. It's a mind
Day
bender.
tripper.
Day tripper. Maybe
Okay.
not for everybody, but definitely experience. I mean, you finish that one, you put it down, you're going to go, wow, I really just experienced something.
Right.
So
That's
you
cool.
you
It's
mentioned
cool when
earlier.
a book can do that.
Oh yeah, and that's
Yeah.
I tried to, when compiling this list, I wanted to make sure that I had some of the things that maybe weren't necessarily that were maybe deeper subject matter, and that were
Hmm.
maybe that would hit you a little harder, if you know
Yep.
what I mean.
Yeah.
But
I think Road to Perdition is most likely one of those. And yeah, what was the other? Oh, and Lone Wolf and Cub too.
oh sure,
There's
yeah,
like a kind of a family element. It's
family
got
element.
heart,
Yeah, I
you know.
agree with you, and I've always been trying to, in my own writing, I
Hmm.
always try to include an emotional component,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
feel that it's missing from a lot of today's
Right.
works,
Yep.
especially in the especially in the indie community. I was getting ready to say there's some great ones out there. It's
Hmm.
difficult to make blanket statements about the graphic novel community because
Right.
there's so many titles.
Yeah.
It runs the gamut from
Yep.
from A to Z. So
Yep.
it's tough to make a statement like that. But returning to the heroes for just a
Yep.
second, this is one that you mentioned earlier, and it's one of my all-time favorites. This is number 4. It's Animal Man by Grant Morrison.
Hmm.
So I take it you're a Grant Morrison fan.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So, um, the Animal Man again, I read when it was serialized, and it was a long time ago. I was probably like buying those off a spinner rack at
Yeah.
7-Eleven for all I know. But I think that character captured me because again, um, he wasn't like obviously he had powers, but he was like a guy just again it was another book that had heart. It wasn't just like a superhero um I felt like there were some horror elements in that too,
Very much so.
which maybe that pulled me in too, you know.
Well, and it applies back to what we sometimes call the new wave of British authors, which in those days they were published under an imprint of DC that was called Vertigo.
Vertigo. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and it was the editor was Karen Berger, and I guess that was one of her assignments, was to scoop up this amazing
Oh,
talent from across the pond, as it were.
right.
And that was
Yep.
essentially, it was Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, and Grant Morrison.
Yep.
And if you bought one of these books, you were basically guaranteed that you were about to have a thrill ride.
Right.
And
Yep.
Animal Man, no exception. And one of my favorite elements of it, it breaks the fourth wall, right? Like you get to the end, and of course, Animal Man meets Grant Morrison in the end, and
Hmm.
it also has a very hard hitting, very emotional ending, and
Hmm.
it's I'd be fair to say it's one of my favorite endings of a graphic novel.
Ah, now you're gonna go. You've enabled me.
Yeah, I'm not going to give it away because I want to keep the surprise for the readers. If you haven't read Animal Man by Grant Morrison, drop everything you're doing and go
Hmm.
check it out. It's one of the best. Number 3, this is a book that lately has a little bit of controversy. I don't know if controversy is the right word, but I guess it's fair to say it's hard-hitting subject matter, and you and I
Hmm.
can discuss this. Number 3, Mouse by Art
Hmm.
Spiegelman.
Hmm.
Um, it's basically the story of a family attempting to survive the Holocaust,
Yep.
and it is portrayed in the way of sort of these anthropomorphic
Yep.
animals.
Yep.
And this book regularly makes the list of what they call banned books, which, before we dive into that, Pete, what are your thoughts on banned books?
We shouldn't ban books because next thing we'll say that, well, we don't like this piece of history, so we're going to ban that history book. And then
Sure.
what are you doing?
Right.
So no, I think uh, books need to be out there. They need to be. You can read a book and not like it, and it doesn't mean that you got to throw it on a burn pile.
Right.
You know, if it's
Right.
not the subject matter that you enjoy, um, yeah, they're actually trying to shut down our local library because there was a particular book that certain people didn't like and they thought it was teaching our young people uh, wrong things. And it's a book about different a different lifestyle, which is well known nowadays, and yet anyway, we won't go too.
Sure. Well,
But
yeah, it's I follow what you're saying, and I'm against censorship too, and
yep.
I think that particularly in the case of mouse, it is something that's important subject matter.
Hmm.
And I guess I should say I don't think books that should be banned.
It's like get rid of Schindler's List.
Right, but I guess I would say if you're talking about having your 7-year-old read mouse, you might want
Yeah,
to.
that'd be
It's a
that
little.
might be a little heavy.
It's a little heavy, right? And
Yeah,
it's there's. I guess at the end of the day, this comes down to parenting, and you should
right.
have some discussions with your child
Hmm.
about what some of the elements of history are very upsetting. And
Right.
there's parts of that book which are, for a grown adult, it's terrifying material.
Hmm.
And I think that,
Well, it makes you think.
right, it makes you think. And I guess I'm not saying I'm for censorship. First of all, I can't seem to say it tonight. But I would say that some things you want to have a conversation with your children before you just sort of
Right.
turn them loose on the
Right.
material.
Yep.
And, like, would that be too upsetting for a child? I guess, it might be. It's pretty, like, he doesn't pull any punches in that
Right.
book, and it's
Right.
you're not going to skip home from the park after reading that one. It's one of the
I'm
most powerful books on this list.
yeah, I think it's one of those things that if you're going to have your kid read it, if they're at a younger age, probably like if they brought it home, you probably wanted to go, oh, let me explain this first,
Right.
and and be warned. So I don't know, might be too. I don't know. Kids nowadays, get they see a lot of stuff,
Right. Yeah.
So you can watch the news and probably get more upset.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to let my kids watch the news. So
Exactly.
So,
I
but
can't watch.
I can kind of see both sides.
Yep.
I personally am a big fan of the book, and I
Hmm.
do think that particularly in this case, the use of sort of these cute and fuzzy animals to describe this utter horror
Right.
is
It's
particularly effective.
genius.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's genius.
Yeah. Yep.
And but I could see where it could potentially be traumatizing for younger folks.
Sure.
So, it's a terrific book and I recommend it, but for younger people, approach with caution. I guess
Right.
sounds like
Yep.
we agree on that.
They'll never go to the pet store quite the same again.
Right, exactly. One thing I did always kind of like, it's cool how the Americans were portrayed as dogs, like the
Right.
big fuzzy friendly people.
Hmm.
So, moving on to number
Yep.
2, we're gonna circle back around. This is a guy we haven't talked about too much on this list, and he definitely deserves at least one place, if not several. Number 2, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller.
Frank Miller. Yep.
Yeah, and I guess I should mention
That's.
there too, of course, Klaus Janson and Lynn Varley.
Hmm.
What's your thoughts on this one, Pete?
So this one really, um, again, I got this when it came out originally, and I loved seeing like it's like the end story of like Batman and Superman, it, and I think there was um, it showed their conflict. I know nowadays they show a lot of the conflict between Batman and Superman and all the rest, but I think this was the first time maybe it was portrayed as really, if I recall this right, like a superhero against a superhero. And of course, it's Batman who's just a man, and
Right.
Superman who's like a god. So you're like going, how in the heck? Um, but the artwork too, the whole book was like so edgy.
Right.
Um,
Well,
and
particularly for this is what, 1986, I guess it was,
yeah,
which if you remember, it's hard for our younger viewers to remember that far back, but
mhm.
superheroes were not like this yet.
They weren't duking it out, and yeah, it was totally uh the Dark Knight it's dark.
It was
So it
one of the first, if not the first, deconstruction of the superhero genre.
mhm.
And like even when you say duking it out, they were trying to kill each other is
Right.
what made it different.
Yeah.
And man, true to form, Batman always the master detective and the smarter of the two. Of
Hmm.
course, he tricks Superman into believing
Yep.
that he's killed him. It was a stroke of genius there.
Right.
And I have loved Frank Miller ever since then. I know that he's kind of a polarizing figure these days, and I guess he's got some political beliefs that not everybody loves. But I guess that's the thing, is that creators they tend to be kind of on the edge, right?
Right. A little
But
bit eclectic.
a little bit, that's putting it mildly. And I was a fan of that. I was a fan of 300. I was a fan of Sin City, one of
Yep.
Frank Miller's
Yeah.
best series, which
Sin
doesn't. I'm always.
City. Yeah.
I love that one. Did you ever read? Do you know "Give Me Liberty," the Martha Washington story?
No.
That's a pretty good one. It's a post-apocalyptic America. That's a pretty good one too.
Oh, now I got to read it.
Yeah, highly recommended. But yeah, like I say, if you haven't read some of these folks, these are some classics, and you will not be disappointed. And by the way, I like to state that we think these are the best, and I try to frame our suggestions in the form of they're things that you can check out yourself and enjoy.
Yeah.
It isn't necessarily where we're going over the things we hate the most.
Right.
There's plenty of that on the internet already.
Yep.
So hopefully you can feel the positivity that we feel and feel the enthusiasm for what we feel are some of the great
these are books that you could sit down with, especially now in their graphic novel form, their fully collected form, and totally enjoy not only the writing, the genius, and the classic stories, but the classic characters that come along with them.
Yeah.
I still love Swamp Thing. It's still a great character, and so any of these books are recommended.
Yeah, and while we're talking about recommended books, and this is almost a little bit of a cliche to name our number one title. And what I mean by that, this book regularly makes top 1 spots in graphic novels. And I'm always surprised when people say, "Oh, I haven't really checked that out." Number 1, Watchmen by Alan Moore.
I haven't really checked. I've read it. Yes.
I can remember now, and everybody's of course a little bit different, but I can remember being an Alan Moore fan. This was many people would say this is his masterpiece.
Yep.
And it's a 12-issue series, and the way that it was connected together with these inventive covers and the symmetrical panels, and it's got the 9-panel pages, which I'm a fan of the 9-panel page. The way it all tied together was like a Swiss watch.
Yep.
And to imagine the level of commitment that Alan Moore must have had for this project, it's here 40 years later, and it's still just mind-blowing that he did this.
Yep.
And there's a reason why this title often makes the number 1 spot. And the reason is it is really that good. It stands out among all the titles as the pinnacle of what creators are trying to accomplish with their characters. And perhaps what makes it even more compelling is they were all his own characters. It's a deconstruction of the genre again, but it's not based on Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. It's his own take.
Of course, DC is more than happy to realize the genius of that whole thing, and I hope they gave Alan a good chunk of money, because of course they're using Dr. Manhattan now. They brought back the Button, and they brought back Rorschach. Tom King wrote a series. I didn't read that one, but I like that character. But yeah, they've incorporated the Watchmen into the DC multiverse timeline, which is fine, because really when I saw them do that, I thought this is excellent, because like we were talking about, I loved the Watchmen. I love that book. I love that series.
Yeah.
So when it's almost like a gimme, it's like, oh, look, they're incorporating the Watchmen in here. I'm gonna just give you my money right now, because if they keep it true to form, it's still gonna be, edgy stuff and little anti-hero, and so and they're doing that. So I'm happy with what they've done. So, but yeah, Watchmen, yeah.
Do you think Watchmen deserves the number 1 spot?
I don't know who else could bump them out, really. I mean, really, The Dark Knight Returns and The Watchmen,
right up there.
Yeah, for sure.
How about did you see the film Watchmen? What did you think of the film?
I like the graphic novel better. I like the movie. It was fine. It's always cool to see, live action or books become live action. Um, I still like the book.
Sure.
So yeah,
I'm right there with you. I'm right there
yeah.
with you. I enjoyed the movie, and I thought
Hmm.
that the way they changed the ending was suitable for a film.
Right.
You got to remind yourself, not everything translates into film very well.
Exactly. Yep.
And I understand Alan Moore's hatred of the industry. I mean, they really did him wrong from top to
Hmm.
bottom, and it's hardly a shocker that corporate America has very
Oh,
little
sure.
respect for creative properties in general.
Yep.
Um, but I kind of get that too. I mean, it's their.
They.
I gotta take Alan Moore's side on this because I'm a creator myself. But on the one hand, publishers create these properties and develop them because they're trying to make money. They're companies, and the one
Hmm.
thing we can say for sure about all companies, profit comes first. They don't
Yep.
care about anything else, and it
Right.
isn't fair to really expect anything else. And I
Right.
think we all go into it like, hey, they're really going to treat me fine, and then
Right.
somehow we're shocked when they don't. And
Right. Well, you do your work for them under their umbrella, and you've pretty much signed a contract, right?
yeah.
So anyway, I mean, it's too bad that you can't get a little respect from that, but yeah.
I,
Anyway,
I
it's
also want to mention too, I'm a huge Alan Moore fan, and you probably got that from just hearing me gassing on about it. Um, did you ever read one of his titles called Miracle Man, or are you familiar with it?
yes, yes, and now that's gonna be regurgitated through Marvel.
Right, right.
So I'm hoping, but yeah, the original Miracle Man,
It's really
yeah,
good stuff. It's
yep,
really good, and that's actually how I learned about Alan Moore. That was with
mm-hmm,
a now defunct publisher called Eclipse Comics, and I
mm-hmm,
used to follow Eclipse, and I'm telling you, Miracle Man was so good. When that book came out, I can remember when the next one was coming to my local comic store, I would run to the store to get the latest issue of Miracle Man, and
mm-hmm.
a lot of people now, this many years later, have recognized this as some of his Alan Moore's best work, if not his best work.
And good luck in finding back issues.
I have mine still.
Do
I-
you?
Yeah, including the what is it, number 15 or 16 with the controversial content.
Mm-hmm.
And also the reason it's rare is because a flood hit the Eclipse warehouse and the bulk of the issues were damaged.
Oh, okay.
So that's a little backstory for you, which I can't believe I'm so much of a nerd that I know that. But yeah, I am a Miracle Man follower.
Wow.
You might be able to make a pretty compelling argument that the reason why I want to make comics is because of Miracle Man.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. So if, based on this list that we talked about, Pete, what would you say is your most influential title on this list? What influenced you the most?
Um, I think I gotta say probably Swamp Thing, even though it's down at what, number 10 or something like that. But
Right.
um, and again, I think it's just there's horror, there's heart. You care about this pretty frightening creature, but you Alan Moore really made you feel for the creature and the man.
Right. Yeah.
So and to me, like when I do my writing with some of the stuff that I know you've read of mine, it is a lot about um, you're not always the hero, and there is often a struggle your character goes through, and yeah, I'd say I probably picked that up from reading some of those books. So yeah, I'd say Swamp Thing is probably influential, one of the influential uh, characters, and Alan Moore, without realizing at the time, probably when I was reading it, without realizing Alan Moore's genius. That yeah, yeah,
Well,
very.
Pete, I'd agree with what you said. And as you know, I'm a fan of your writing, and I'm a fan of Big Jack. And I'll say it here to our viewers. I think that the way you develop your characters is terrific, and I think the dialogue's compelling, and I think that's one of the things you do best is your characters. I've actually often mentioned that I'm somewhat angry about that because I feel you develop your characters better than I do. But I will
Thank you.
say that I think Big Jack's a terrific series, and I'd like to recommend to our viewers to follow it. Can you tell us a little bit about where we can follow your works?
Sure. As far as where you can find me, um, and information about Big Jack, obviously on Facebook, um, at P Welmerink. Um, oh, where else? If you go there, I'm probably going to be throwing out all sorts of links on my Facebook page. But as you know, the third issue is going to be coming out this month, which will be the final issue of that storyline. And
Looking forward to it, man.
yeah, and again, I I put some heart into it, and even though, you know, the main character is kind of a big badass, but he's got his reason for what he's doing, you know. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely. Well, I will make sure to put the links in the description below. And I'd
yeah,
like to
there's more
mention,
links. I just can't think of all the,
I'll
you
take
know.
care of that. I'll take care of that. And I also want to mention before we wrap things up that of course, this is also the pre-launch for my next book, which is the fourth volume, unbelievably, of Water Wars 2288, a post-apocalyptic tone poem. And I'll put the link below. You can follow the pre-launch. And if you like the kind of stuff that Pete and I have been talking about, I highly recommend that you check out Big Jack and Water Wars 2288
I
from Earth
highly
Dog
recommend.
Studios.
I highly recommend all the Water Wars titles.
Thanks,
So
man.
they're great. The artwork's great. The storytelling's great. Yeah.
Pete, you and I are going to take over the world. It's just a matter of time. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on tonight. That is
Thanks
our
for having me.
list. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. We do actually have some plans for the next one. So, viewers, you have not seen the last of Peter Welmerink. And if you like what you're seeing here, please leave a comment below. I only have a few subscribers, but feel free to like and subscribe and all that kind of thing. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Holden's Top 11. Good night, everybody.